Keyshawn Davis went out there and did exactly what you expected him to do. He went out there in the biggest fight of his career. Jose Pedraza is a former two-time world champion. The man went out there and beat the brakes off him. I mean, it wasn't even close. And let's remember who we're talking about here. Jose Pedraza is no bum. He's no walk in the park. Like I mentioned, a former two-time world champion. You go and you look at his resume, there's a lot of names out there. He's only been stopped one time before. Got a few losses, yeah, but he's only been stopped one time before. That was by Jose Davis. And Keyshawn Davis went out there and beat the brakes off him. And I get it, man. 34 years old, was fighting at 140, came back down to 135. Tough things. Nevertheless, you know, we got to admit that it is what it is, and that was an incredibly impressive performance, right? And it wasn't just the fact that he beat him, and it wasn't just the fact that he got the stoppage. I mean, I can say those things, and those are big enough, right? Those are impressive things in and of themselves. Keyshawn's only got 10 fights with 7 stoppages. Those are impressive things, but it was also the way in which he did it. Right? We can't underestimate that. You got to give it the eye test. You got to look at the way things go down, right? He was expected to win this fight. We saw the way that it was being matched up. We saw what the odds were. We knew that he was supposed to go out and win this fight, but it was the way in which he did it. Jose Pedraza comes out and goes, look, man, I'm going to push the pace on this one. He's talking about it in the build up to the fight. He's mentioning it in the pre-fight meetings. I'm going to push the pace on this one. I'm going to put a work rate on him. I'm going to make him uncomfortable. Right? I'm going to put him in positions that he doesn't quite want to be in. I'm going to throw a lot of punches, overwhelm him at times. That's how I'm going to win the fight. Okay. We can understand that. A man with more experience decides that that's a game plan that he's going to come out and implement. Now the question is only how's Davis going to respond, right? How exactly is it that he's going to do that? And you expect a man with a pedigree like him to have an answer. The man was a silver medalist in the Olympic Games. They don't just hand those out. They're not just giving them out to anybody. It's not just like you can just be any bum off the street and you're coming in and you're snatching up a silver medal. So he comes with that as his amateur pedigree. We've seen what he's done in the pros. Biggest fight of his career. How is he going to answer a game plan from the veteran? And man, he went out there and he made it look easy. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He was patient. He showed poise. He was composed. He was getting the timing. He was getting the rhythm. Dude, Pedraza wanted to press. He wanted to be aggressive. Great. Keyshawn was on his back foot. He was backing up. He was moving around. He was using angles. I would say by about halfway through the second round, maybe a little bit more, maybe about a minute left in the second round is when you started to see it all start to click. Man, it was beautiful the way that he would back up. Pedraza, you could tell that thought he was going to get him against the ropes. He would execute beautiful pivots and spins off. He would get right back to the center of the ring. He was punching in combination. He was going to the body and then finishing up top. He was working the jab. He was boxing, but he wasn't boxing too much. You see a lot of guys go out there and just use all this unnecessary movement and wasting all this energy and just moving around in ways that are unnecessary because they're so far from their opponent. What's it matter? What are you using all that movement for anyways? That wasn't what we saw yesterday. We saw just beautiful efficiency, right? He was in there and he was moving around, but at the same time, he was always within range. He was only using little half steps. He was putting himself in beautiful positions to be able to counterpunch. Oh man, I mean, it was a great performance. In the third round, that's when we saw the beating just start to begin, right? He actually started to get from the back foot to the front foot at times and be a little bit aggressive. I mean, like I said, the body work, the way he was going upstairs, the way he was finishing, the way he was counterpunching, the way he was putting the pressure on and just going around the guard and straight punch. We saw everything that we wanted to see from a young fighter. We saw everything that you could want to see. You go out there and you look at the way he's catching and countering. You look at the way he's timing shots and mastering the distance. Everything that you want to see from a young fighter, right? Just phenomenal performance. I mentioned he's only got 10 fights. We're talking about a guy with 10 fights and 7 knockouts. He comes out there, he jumps on the mic in the post-fight and does what nobody expected him to do. Calls out the guy in the main event. He says, Teofimo, you either win in this one, I want you. I'm going to move up to 140 pounds. I'm going to come out there. I'm going to do what I did tonight to this man, and I'm going to do it to you. Bold prediction, man. Bold prediction, because we all know what Teofimo brings to the table. He went out there, not a very impressive performance in the main event that night, but we can't discount who the man is and what he brings to the table and the things that he's done in the past. But the call out was crazy. And then the other one, you know, I was a little bit surprised by the Teofimo call out, but obviously you can respect it. Even if you think he's punching a little bit above his weight, even if you think he isn't quite ready for the fight, whatever the case may be, you can respect the fact that the man is calling out somebody who's bigger and better and more accomplished than him in that regard. But then he turns around and he calls out Navarrete. He's like, if Teofimo doesn't want it, if that doesn't work out for whatever the case may be, he calls out Navarrete. I wasn't necessarily feeling that one, man. You know, I would have much rather seen him call out other guys on 135 pounds. There's guys for him to fight at that weight class, right? I mean, think about all the names that we could mention, like Zepeda or Frank Martin. We jump all the way up. We're talking about Lomachenko, Kambosos, Gervonta Davis. I mean, the list goes on and on. What if Isaac Cruz may come back down to 135 pounds? I know he's going to be fighting at 140 when we see him on March 30th, but who's to say that we won't see him at lightweight again? So there's a lot of potential fights there. I was a little bit interested to see specifically who it was that he was calling out and why he was doing it, but man, what a performance. Right? What a performance. I mean, and you think about what potential fights lie out there for him and how he could potentially match up, that the fact that the man's only 24 years old. You got to imagine that there's still going to be a lot of room for improvement in his game. What else are we going to see next? What little wrinkles are going to be there? Now, I'm not turning around. I don't want to break out the anointing oil just yet. It's not like we're talking about putting this man in the Hall of Fame. Okay, 10 fights, 7 knockouts. Let's call it what it is. And if we're being exactly and truly honest with each other, we got to say he looks very good. We got to say that he's ready to progress to the next level after the performance that he put on with this one. But at the same time, it's not like we're talking about him fighting for, snatching up all the world titles yet. It's not like we're looking at him thinking, oh, this man needs to be stepping in there with Lomachenko at this time. We need to be making this fight with Gervonta Davis. I mean, don't get me wrong. Maybe you think that he'll look good in spots in those fights. Maybe you think that he'll actually look good for long periods in those fights. Personally, I don't think he's ready for those fights, right? I mean, I know he called out Teofimo, which is the top of the food chain at 140 pounds, and he's got all the belts, and guys can say whatever they want. But if you really think about it, if you picture him jumping in there with Lomachenko, how do you think that's going to look? If you picture him jumping in there with Gervonta Davis, how do you think that's going to look? I don't think when that fight turns out and it's all said and done that it would turn out well. Dude's got an incredibly bright future in front of him, right? We saw what Shakur Stevenson said, the now retired, but we all know he's not really retired, Shakur Stevenson calling him a future. We saw what Ryan Garcia was putting out there, talking about how the man's going to be next. Future's going to be bright, man. Future's going to be bright. It won't be too long before we see him fighting for a world title. It won't be too long before we see his game even getting sharper and sharper. The man's going to be a problem. So let me know what you guys think. Were you as impressed with this performance as I was? What do you think is going to be next for him? Where does Jose Pedraza go from here too? Right? This is he gatekeeper status? Is he journeyman status? What's next for the man? Let me know what you guys think.